The spaceship was quiet. Its lights flickered softly in the dark. Inside, the aliens looked at the frozen human in the cryo chamber. They were excited and nervous. This human was said to be very strong and powerful. Zara, the curious scientist, pressed buttons on the control panel. She was eager to see what would happen. Croth, the military leader, crossed his arms and frowned. "Are you sure this is a good idea, Zara?" "What if he wakes up angry?" he asked, his voice heavy with doubt. He was not a fan of taking risks. Zara smiled confidently. "We need to know what he can do. He might be able to help us." With a final press, she activated the awakening sequence. The chamber buzzed and lights flashed brightly. Suddenly, the chamber opened with a loud hiss. Ice crystals fell away and steam filled the room. The human slowly stirred. Jake blinked his eyes open, disoriented. He saw strange shapes around him. His heart raced as he struggled to remember where he was. The last thing he remembered was going to sleep. But now he was in a place that felt alien. "Who are you?" Jake shouted, his voice rough. He felt panic rise in his chest. He quickly looked around, his instincts telling him to be ready for anything. The aliens were unlike anything he had ever seen. They were tall and thin, with bright, colorful skin. Their eyes were big and wide, full of fear and curiosity. Zara stepped forward cautiously, holding up her hands. "Wait! We mean you no harm," she said, trying to calm him. "We are scientists. We awakened you from cryo sleep." Jake squinted at her. "What do you want from me?" he asked, trying to sound tough, but he felt unsure. The aliens seemed to be scared, but he couldn't take any chances. Croth watched closely. He was not convinced that this human was friendly. "He looks dangerous. We should restrain him," he said, his voice low and serious. Zara shook her head. "No." "Let's try to talk to him first," she insisted. "We need to know if he can help us." She hoped Croth would listen to her. As Jake stood up, he felt his muscles tense. He took a step back, sizing up the aliens. They looked more afraid of him than he was of them, but he had no way of knowing if they were truly harmless. He remembered his training. He had to stay alert. "Talk?" Jake said, raising an eyebrow. "How can we talk when you're keeping me in this place?" "Let me out!" His voice echoed in the chamber, and the aliens flinched. Croth frowned, feeling his patience run thin. "You will be quiet!" "We will not let you go until we know you won't attack us," he shouted. The tension in the room grew thick. Jake felt a surge of anger. "I'm not your enemy!" he yelled, clenching his fists. He was tired of being treated like a prisoner. The aliens stared, surprised by his strength. They had not expected him to react this way. Zara took a deep breath and tried to regain control. "Let's take a moment to breathe," she said softly. "We can learn from each other." She glanced at Croth, hoping he would calm down. Jake's heart raced as he realized how outnumbered he was, but he also sensed that he had power here. He decided to take a different approach. "Okay, let's talk. But I want to know what's going on," he said, his voice steady. Croth and Zara exchanged glances. Maybe talking was a better idea. They had awakened a powerful being. If they wanted his help, they had to earn his trust. "All right," Croth said, his tone softer. "We will listen, but do not try anything foolish." Jake nodded, ready to understand these strange creatures. He was far from home, but he would find a way to survive. The adventure was just beginning, and he needed to learn as much as he could about these aliens and their world. The tension in the room was thick. Jake stood tall, his body tense as he faced the aliens. Zara and Croth looked back at him with a mix of fear and curiosity. They had never met a human before, and now they had one standing right in front of them. Zara took a deep breath. "Let's start over. My name is Zara, and this is Croth," she said, pointing to the military leader beside her. "We woke you from cryo sleep because we need your help." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Help? Why would I help you?" He crossed his arms, feeling cautious. The aliens had awakened him without his consent, and he wasn't sure if they could be trusted. Croth stepped forward, trying to appear strong. "You are powerful. We have enemies in this galaxy, and you might be the key to our survival," he said. His tone was firm, but a hint of fear lingered in his eyes. Jake listened carefully. He knew he was strong, but could he really help these aliens? "What kind of enemies?" he asked, curious yet skeptical. Zara jumped in. "There is a rival faction that wants to destroy us. They see us as weak because we are peaceful. We thought you could fight for us," she explained. "Fight?" Jake echoed, feeling a mix of pride and concern. He had been a soldier, but this was a different situation. He wanted to know more before making any decisions. What do they want from you? Croth glared at Jake. They want our resources and technology. They believe we are unworthy of our power. If we don't fight back, they will destroy us, he said, his anger boiling over. Jake felt the weight of their words. He remembered his own planet and the battles he had fought. So, you need me to help you win? He asked, keeping his voice calm. Zara nodded eagerly. Yes, we believe you have the skills to turn the tide in our favor. But first we need to trust each other, she said, hoping her words would convince him. Trust? Jake scoffed. You woke me up without asking. How can I trust you? He took a step back, eyes scanning the room for exits. He still felt trapped, and that made him uneasy. Croth frowned, feeling defensive. We had no choice. You were in cryo-sleep for too long. We needed to see if you could help us. His frustration showed, and Jake could sense the fear behind it. Zara held up her hands, trying to calm the situation. Let's work together. We can show you our world, and you can decide if you want to help, she suggested. Jake considered her words. He could learn about their technology and maybe even find a way back home. All right, he said slowly. But I want to see what I'm getting into first. Croth crossed his arms, still unsure. Fine, but remember, you are still a threat. We will keep an eye on you. As they spoke, the ship suddenly shook. Alarms blared loudly and red lights flashed around them. Jake's heart raced as he realized they were in danger. What's happening? He shouted, instinctively preparing for a fight. Zara rushed to the control panel. We're under attack! The enemy fleet has found us! Her hands moved quickly over the buttons as she tried to stabilize the ship. Croth turned to Jake, his eyes filled with urgency. We need you now! If you can fight, we need you on the front lines. Jake felt the adrenaline surge through him. This was the moment he had trained for. Show me where I'm needed, he yelled, ready to act. Zara nodded and led the way. She showed him to the armory, a room filled with weapons and armor. Jake felt a rush of excitement. He had fought many battles before, but this was different. He was fighting for survival, and he was not alone. As he picked up a weapon, he felt a sense of purpose. The aliens were counting on him, and he would not let them down. The ship shook again, and Jake knew they had to act fast. Let's go! He shouted, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He was ready to face whatever awaited them. Together, they would fight against the enemy and prove that they were stronger than anyone thought. The ship shook violently as the alarms blared. Jake felt the adrenaline coursing through his body. He was in a foreign place, surrounded by aliens, yet he was ready to fight. Zara led the way to the armory, her heart racing with both fear and excitement. Croth followed closely, his face set in a grim expression. As they entered the armory, Jake's eyes widened. The room was filled with strange weapons and armor that glowed softly. He picked up a sleek rifle that felt comfortable in his hands. What is this? He asked, turning it over. Zara smiled, eager to explain. This is a plasma rifle. It's our most powerful weapon. You'll need it if we are to survive. She handed him a belt with extra energy cells. Jake felt a rush of confidence. I can work with this, he said, strapping the belt around his waist. He quickly glanced at Croth, who was busy checking his own weapons. What's the plan? Croth turned to Jake, his eyes serious. We need to defend the ship. The enemy wants our technology and will stop at nothing to get it. If they board us, we are done for, he warned. Let's show them what we can do, Jake replied, his voice filled with determination. He felt like a soldier again, ready to fight for something bigger than himself. Zara led them to a control room where they could see the enemy ships on the screens. They were dark and menacing, approaching fast. There are at least 10 enemy ships, she said, her voice shaky. They outnumber us. Jake looked at the screens, calculating their next move. We have to fight back. I'm not afraid of numbers, he said, gripping the rifle tightly. Croth nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. That's the spirit! We will use the ship's cannons to fire at them first. We need to buy time for the crew to prepare, he instructed. Zara quickly tapped buttons on the console, aiming the ship's cannons. Ready when you are, she called out. Jake stepped up beside her, taking a deep breath. Let's do this, he shouted. The ship fired its first shot, and a bright beam of energy shot out into space, hitting one of the enemy ships. The ship shook again as they returned fire, but Jake held his ground. He could feel the heat of battle rising, and it excited him. Keep firing, Croth commanded, firing his own weapon at the enemies. Jake joined him, unleashing a barrage of shots. The energy beams lit up the dark space, and he felt a thrill with each hit. Zara watched in awe. "You're incredible!" she exclaimed, noticing how effortlessly Jake handled the weapon. He was unlike any soldier they had ever seen. As the battle continued, Jake became more confident. He moved with speed and precision, taking down enemy ships one by one. "They don't stand a chance!" he shouted, feeling powerful. But just then, an enemy ship managed to dodge their fire and got close to the hull. Jake felt a jolt as the ship rocked violently. "They're boarding us!" he yelled, realizing the danger. Croth looked at Zara. "We must hold the line! Get to the main entrance and prepare to fight," he ordered. Zara nodded, her determination rising. "Jake, you take point! We'll follow you." Jake sprinted toward the entrance, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He could hear the sounds of the enemy hitting the ship. He arrived at the door, ready to face whatever came through. With a loud crash, the door burst open. Aliens in dark armor charged in, weapons drawn. Jake felt a surge of fear, but he pushed it aside. He raised his rifle and fired without hesitation. Energy beams lit up the room, hitting the enemy with accuracy. Croth and Zara followed close behind, joining the fight. Together, they pushed back the invading aliens, using teamwork to stay strong. The enemies fell one by one, but they kept coming. Jake could feel the strain of battle, but he refused to back down. He fought like a warrior, moving with agility and strength. As the last enemy fell, the room fell silent. Jake breathed heavily, looking around at the destruction. The aliens had learned a valuable lesson. This human was not just powerful, he was a force to be reckoned with. Zara and Croth stood beside him, their faces filled with admiration and respect. "You did it, Jake! You saved us!" Zara said, her voice filled with awe. Jake felt a wave of pride wash over him. "We did it together. I'm not alone anymore," he replied, realizing that he had found a place among these aliens. They had fought side by side, and he was ready to fight for them again. The battle had only just begun, and Jake knew he would face whatever came next with strength and courage. Together, they would prove their worth against the galaxy's threats. The battle was over, but Jake's heart still raced. He stood in the dim light of the ship, surrounded by Zara and Croth. They were checking for any remaining enemies, but Jake's mind was elsewhere. As he leaned against the wall, he felt a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions swirling inside him. Jake had been in cryo sleep for years. He remembered a life filled with battles, loss, and pain. But now he was awake in a new world, fighting alongside aliens. What did this all mean? Zara noticed his silence and approached him. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Her eyes were filled with concern. Jake forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine," he replied. But he knew he was lying. He felt out of place, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. "I just need a moment to think." She nodded, understanding that he needed space. Croth joined them, still scanning the area. "You fought well, human," he said, his tone more respectful now. "Your skills are unmatched. We need you for what comes next." Jake felt a surge of pride, but also fear. What if he couldn't keep up? What if they depended on him too much? His mind raced with questions. He had spent so long fighting on Earth, but this was different. These aliens were counting on him, and he couldn't let them down. As he watched Zara and Croth work together, he began to reflect on his own life. Back on Earth, he had always been the one fighting alone. His team had fallen one by one in battles, leaving him feeling isolated. Now he had allies, and they were fighting for a common goal. But could he truly trust them? What if they turned on him? The thought sent a chill down his spine. He remembered the times he had been betrayed, the times he had trusted the wrong people. He pushed those memories away, refusing to let fear control him again. Zara returned, her face filled with determination. "We need to prepare for the next battle. They will come again," she said, breaking through his thoughts. "We must be ready." Jake nodded, shaking off his doubts. "What's the plan?" he asked, his voice steady. He wanted to be part of this fight, to prove himself to them and to himself. Croth stepped forward, his expression serious. "We must gather our forces and strengthen our defenses. The enemy will not rest until they destroy us." As they spoke, Jake's mind shifted from doubt to focus. He was a soldier. This was what he had trained for. He had faced greater odds before. If he could survive on Earth, he could survive here. "Let's do it," Jake said, his voice filled with conviction. "I'm ready." Zara smiled, her confidence returning. "Good. We can use your expertise to train our soldiers. We need to improve their combat skills. Jake felt a spark of excitement. This was his chance to lead, to show them what a human could do. I can help with that. I know a few techniques that could give us an edge. Croth crossed his arms, intrigued. Teach us what you know. We can learn from each other. As they began to strategize, Jake felt a sense of belonging. He was no longer alone. He had a purpose, a mission, and allies who believed in him. Later, as they gathered the soldiers, Jake looked around at the aliens. They were different, but they all had one goal: to survive. He felt a sense of unity among them, something he hadn't felt in a long time. As they practiced combat techniques, Jake saw the determination in their eyes. They were willing to learn, to adapt, and he admired their spirit. He felt a warmth in his heart, realizing that he was part of something greater than himself. But in the back of his mind, the fear still lingered. What if he failed them? What if he couldn't lead them to victory? He pushed those thoughts away again, focusing on the training ahead. After hours of practice, the soldiers were exhausted but eager to learn more. Jake felt a sense of accomplishment. He had made a difference today. As he walked back to his quarters, Jake reflected on everything that had happened. He was no longer just a soldier from Earth. He was Jake, a human fighting for a cause that mattered. The galaxy was dangerous, but together they could face whatever threats came their way. He had found a new home among these aliens, and he was ready to protect it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Jake was ready to meet them head-on. The fear inside him had started to fade, replaced by a growing strength and determination. For the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful about the future. The next day dawned bright and clear in the alien ship. Jake awoke with a sense of purpose. He stretched and felt ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. After the intense training session yesterday, he knew he was building something special with Zara and Croth. They were no longer just allies, they were becoming a team. As he got dressed, Jake thought about the mission. The enemy would return soon, and they needed a solid plan. He couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. This was his chance to create a team that could stand against any threat. When Jake stepped into the main area of the ship, he saw Zara and Croth already discussing strategies with other alien soldiers. Their voices were filled with energy and determination. Jake joined them, ready to contribute. "Good morning, Jake," Zara called, her face lighting up. "We were just talking about the enemy's next move. We need to be ready." Croth nodded, his expression serious. "We have learned that they plan to attack again. They are gathering forces, and we must prepare ourselves." Jake felt a rush of adrenaline. "What do you need from me?" he asked, eager to help. Zara looked at him with respect. "You have unique skills that can help us. We need to train more soldiers in combat. Not everyone is ready to fight." Jake considered this. "All right, let's form a team of the best fighters and teach them how to defend themselves. We need to build a strong defense." Croth smiled, appreciating Jake's initiative. "A great idea. We will work together to select the best soldiers." The three of them moved to the training area where various alien soldiers were stretching and preparing. Jake took a deep breath, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. He had to show them he was a good leader. "Listen up, everyone!" Jake shouted, his voice booming. The soldiers turned to him, their expressions curious. "Today we are forming a new team. We will train hard and learn how to fight together. Who is with me?" A few soldiers stepped forward, ready to join him. Zara and Croth stood beside him, showing their support. "Together, we can make a difference," Jake continued, feeling the energy in the room. The soldiers cheered, and Jake felt a rush of pride. He was leading a team, and it felt powerful. They spent the day training, practicing different combat techniques. Jake shared his knowledge, teaching them how to work as a unit. He encouraged teamwork, showing them how to communicate effectively. "In battle, we must trust each other," he told them. "If we work together, we can overcome any challenge." As the sun set, they finished their training session, and the soldiers were exhausted but eager for more. Jake looked around at their faces, seeing determination in their eyes. This was his team. Croth clapped Jake on the back. "You have done well, human. They respect you." Zara nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "You have made a real difference here, Jake. I knew you could do it." Feeling the warmth of their words, Jake smiled. "Thank you. But it's not just me. It's all of us working together." That night, as they gathered for a meal, the atmosphere was filled with camaraderie. They shared stories and laughter, creating bonds that felt strong. Jake felt a sense of family forming. something he had longed for. As he sat with Zara and Croth, he realized how much he had changed since waking up from cryo sleep. He was no longer just a soldier alone in a fight. He had friends, a team, and a purpose. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared again, cutting through the joyful atmosphere. The lights flickered, and a voice echoed over the intercom. "Incoming enemy ships! All soldiers to your stations!" Jake's heart raced. The moment they had prepared for was here. He stood up, adrenaline surging through him. "This is it! Everyone, let's move!" he shouted, rallying his team. Zara and Croth were at his side, ready to fight. As they hurried to their stations, Jake felt a sense of calm wash over him. He looked at his new team, seeing the determination in their eyes. They were ready. As the enemy ships closed in, Jake felt a surge of confidence. They had trained hard, and now it was time to prove themselves. He knew they would fight together and protect each other, no matter what. With a deep breath, Jake prepared himself for battle. He was no longer just a human soldier, he was a leader, fighting for his team and their future. The battle ahead would test them, but he was ready to face it head-on. Together they would show the galaxy what they were made of.